Okay, kiddos, so this is our lesson for Unit 1, Day 4. This is our do now. And everything in the do now is pretty straightforward. I don't think I need to give you any hints or anything. I think you'll be able to figure this all out. Number 2, you're going to have to use your brain a little bit, but I think you've got it. Okay, so here's our EQs for Unit 1, Day 4. What is our axiomatic definition of parallel lines? What are vertical angles? How can we draw a set of vertical angles? What is our lines transversal definition of parallel lines? And how can we use algebra along with our understanding of vertical angles to calculate unknown angles? We'll be able to answer all of those and more at the end. So first, what I need you to do is follow along with me, assuming that you're watching this video. Follow along with me here. So step 1, draw a line. So there's a line being cut. So I put that in quotes. It's not literally being cut, but being cut by a transversal using a ruler. And of course, you're going to be using a ruler. I don't have like a digital ruler I can use, so I'm just going to do this. Anyway, so this is my line. I'm just going to put in L for line. Being cut by a transversal. Being cut by a transversal. So this line that's quote-unquote cutting my other line is called my transversal. Okay, that's this guy here. Right? How many vertices have we created? Well, we've created one vertex. How many angles have we drawn? From this one vertex, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 angles that we've drawn. So let's measure the angles and label them using letters. Okay, of course, I am not going to have a protractor to use digitally on here. I'm going to leave that to you, however you've drawn it. But let's say for all intents and purposes on mine, if I measure my angle here, so I'm going to call this angle A. If I measure this angle, and it's obtuse, so it's greater than 90, so I'm going to just pretend like this is 140 degrees. Let's just go ahead and go with that. My angle B, let's pretend is 40 degrees. C, actually, here, let me go the other way. So let me say that C is over here. C is going to be 40 degrees also, and D is also going to be 140, just like A. Okay, and you'll notice this pattern when you actually draw this out. All right, so maybe when you draw yours out, it won't measure 140 and 40 and whatever. Maybe yours will measure different, and that's the point. You need to not draw it exactly how I did. Draw it however you did and see what it measures out to. Okay, so once we've measured them and labeled them using letters, the pattern that we notice, or what we notice about the angles, is that angle A and angle D are equal, and angle C and angle B will also be equal. Okay, so if I color code, so B and C would be equal, and A and D would be equal. Okay? How many pairs of supplemental angles do you count? So if you remember, supplemental angles are angles whose sum is 180 degrees, right? So I've got one pair of supplemental angles there, right? I have got another pair of supplemental angles here, right? I've got another here, and I've got another here. Okay? So if you count them, there's four pairs of supplemental angles, right? So vertical angles, that's our new vocabulary. What I've drawn, this whole mess here that I've drawn, let me see if I can erase some of this, make it look not so terrible. What I've drawn here is a set of vertical angles. Okay, a set of vertical angles. A set of vertical angles is 4 angles formed by a line being cut by a transversal. Okay? Another definition we can use, another definition that we can use is four angles that share the same vertex. Okay, so I've got one vertex and 1, 2, 3, 4 angles. Okay, so here I've got a conjecture. Okay, so if angles A, B, C, and D are all equal, then line M and transversal T are perpendicular, and if you don't remember what perpendicular is, that means they intersect at 90 degrees, right? So if this angle A equals angle B equals angle C and D, if they're all four equal, right, then that means line M and T are perpendicular. Okay, so is that true or false? Well, absolutely this is true. How do I know that? Well, if they are all equal, that means each one must be 90. Okay, so one thing about vertical angles, when you add all four angles formed by the same vertex, when you add all four of them together, you're always going to get a sum of 360 degrees. Vertical angles always add to 360 degrees. Okay, so if they're all four equal, all four of them have to be 90 degrees. 90 times 4 gives me the 360. Okay, so my proof would be this picture right here, plain and simple, right? Okay, here's another one. Consider the following conjecture along with associated geometric construction. So when you see this word geometric construction, that's a fancy way of saying drawing. That's just a fancy way of saying a drawing or a picture. Okay, so if angles A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H are all different, then lines M and N are parallel. Is that true or false? So common sense tells us, just by looking at the picture, this is obviously circled the wrong thing. I was saying it in my head. This is obviously false. Okay? This is obviously false. Now, what I want you to do on number 2, is answer the question, well, how do we make this conjecture here? How do I make this conjecture? How do I make it true? How do I make it true? What could we change up? And your answer there is you would have to say A equals D and E equals H, and B would have to be equal to C, and F would have to be equal to G. Okay? So, and I shouldn't have put an M there, I should have put an equal. Okay, so A, D, E, and H would all have to be equal, same as for B, C, F, and G. They would all have to be equal. Okay, so these would be equal to one set, these would be equal to another. Okay, that would make it true. Okay, so if we prove it, and let me give myself a blank slide to use here. The way we would prove it, so there's a line, there's another line. Okay, so now I have two vertices formed, so I've got two lines being cut by a transversal, right? So here's my transversal, T. We'll call this line M, this is line N. Now, if A equals B, okay, so this is A, actually, that wouldn't be B. That would be D. If A equals D, so let me go ahead and get these going. And then I'll color code and circle and tell you what it is I'm talking about. Okay, so if A equals D and E equals H, so they're all the same measure, okay, then we would say M and N are parallel. Or, big or you could also say if B equals C equals F equals G. So if B, C, F, and G are all equal, you could also say that M and N are parallel. Okay, so if either one of these two things is true, then there you have it. Okay, and I'll leave you to prove it. If you actually draw it, it will be true. Okay, so how many vertices are formed when two lines are cut by the same transversal? Well, we just did that. 2. So that would be our answer there. How many sets of vertical angles are formed? Well, we have 2 instances of 4 angles sharing the same vertex, right? So we would say 2 sets of vertical angles are formed because we have 2 vertices. How many angles are formed when 2 lines are cut by the same transversal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and how many pairs of supplementary angles do you count? Well, there's 4 pairs to each set of vertical angles, so there would be 8. What patterns do you notice about angles formed by parallel lines cut by the same transversal? Okay, the pattern that we notice is that corresponding angles are congruent. Okay, so angle 2 is equal to angle 3 is equal to angle 7 is equal to angle 6, right? And angle 1 is equal to angle 4 is equal to angle 5 is equal to angle 8. Okay, so we would word that as, let's see if I can spell it, corresponding angles are congruent, period. Okay, that's the pattern that we take from that. Okay, moving on. So now we can use, it's so set in stone how vertical angles work that we can use it algebraically, right? So what is the measure of angle A? That's our first question. This angle here is angle A. We're just told that x plus 5 equals angle A, but we know that angle B equals 130. Well, A plus B, right? This is a supplemental pair of angles. A plus B should equal 180. Well, A is x plus 5. So that means x plus 5 plus 130 degrees should equal 180. All we'd have to do from here is simply solve this equation. Okay, so nothing too special there. So if we go ahead and do that, we can combine like terms. So we have x plus 135 now equals 180. Okay, subtract 135 from both sides. What I do on one side, I do the other. X is going to be equal to 45. Okay, so now that we know what x is, if we wanted to, and we could have used common sense, angle A, if this is 130, that means this guy has to be 50. And if we substitute in for x, well, duh, 45 plus 5 is going to give me 50 degrees. So angle A is 50 degrees. We knew that we could have known that without even finding x. Okay, anyway, what is the measure of angle C? Well, B and C are going to be corresponding. They'll be equal. So if this guy is 130, that means this guy is also 130. And number 4, what is the measure of D? Well, if this guy is 50, that means this guy is 50. Okay, so now we've got a little bit more complicated of an example. We have 2 sets of vertical angles now. 1, 2. Right? So 6x plus b, that should add up to 180. Okay? But that doesn't help us because I've got 2 variables now. So the way I need to go about this is, what is its corresponding angle? Its corresponding angle would be E, right? But they are not equivalent, so that doesn't help me either. The corresponding angles won't be equal because these two lines are not parallel. Okay, so that's a problem. So we have to look at the supplementary side. E plus F should add to 180. So that means 140, right? 140, that's E, plus 2x should equal 180. We would just subtract 140 from both sides. And we're left with 2x equals 40. Then we have to divide by 2 on both sides. X is going to equal 20. Okay, so now that we know what x is, if x is 20 and f is 2 times x, that means f is 40 degrees, which makes sense because 40 plus 140 would be 180. Right? If this guy's 40, that means this guy is 40. If this guy is 140, that means this guy is 140. Okay? And we know what x is now. So if a is 6 times x, that means it's 6 times 20. That's going to be 120 degrees. Okay? And a plus b, these two angles should be supplemental. Right? So that means B is 60 degrees, which means C is 60 degrees, which means D is 120 degrees. Okay, so here's the guided practice that I need you to do. And if you need any help with that, or you have any trouble, shoot me an email or come through to tutoring, and we can get you through that super easy. And here's your EQs. Same thing, you need to get those into your notes. You know how to submit these. Submit your EQs and your notes together as a PDF. And that's all I've got for you in this lesson, kiddos. Goodbye.